The movie Drome next Sunday is from director Jonathan Demme and focuses on the harsh realities of life in a women's prison. Caged Heat is at 11:50.
And what's Cook's nickname now around the Foreign Office?
Finished. Ready, steady.
A new series of Have I Got News For You starts Friday at 10 on BBC Two.
Here comes the bride.
Oh, you look gorgeous, James.
Oh, you look lovely.
Does my hair look like shit?
The final part of the royal family, tomorrow at 10 on BBC Two.
A weather view now on BBC Two with Michael Fish.
Hello, there's some interesting weather earlier on and some interesting weather in the week ahead, often wet and windy. But as I said earlier on, there was a waterspout observed off the Lizard Point, and in Cornwall there was some hail the size of marbles and some nasty thunderstorms, almost an inch of rain in just a couple of hours or so. Mind you, that's nothing compared to North America. Just look at Texas, 340 millimetres of rain. That's, what, 14 inches or more in the last 24 hours, and I would imagine some problems with flooding. Here's that weather system and a very, very active front that's been easing eastwards during the course of the last day or so. Further heavy rain to come there in the southernmost parts around Texas. As a matter of fact, that's linked through to a couple of hurricanes lurking off the Mexican coast. That one there always getting very close to the area of Acapulco. Moving right across the other side of the world, in Australia, it's interesting to see that Sydney almost had a record high temperature, up to 36 degrees, but the winds are going to change. It is going to get a good deal cooler, and we're having a change in wind across the British Isles and many parts of Europe. The winds are quite chilly at the moment, coming in from the west and the northwest, eventually getting somewhat warmer. High pressure holding in the Mediterranean though, so if it's sunshine you're after, maybe just 1 or 2 showers in the central parts. Otherwise it's fine there, but it's less settled further north. Now, lurking out here on the Atlantic, here's the next sign of trouble heading in towards the British Isles. It's an area of low pressure already winding itself up, and the weather fronts associated with that are going to come in towards the British Isles. Loads of isobars, as you see. Another area of low pressure later on in the week. So the message is simple, that after a quieter interlude it is going to get windy, and it's often going to be wet and pretty unsettled too. Here are those winds. They start off from the chilly west or northwest, but then around about the middle of the week swing back to the southwest. The colours of the arrows have changed from the cool greens to the warmer orange colours, so we will see the temperatures rising as the week goes on. Recently there were some very heavy showers in some of these western parts, and thunder too. Those showers are going to continue near those western coasts and more generally in western Scotland, some snow over the hills. 1 or 2 of those rogue showers slipping across through central and eastern areas of England, but eventually ending up fairly chilly, although not as cold as it was, certainly 2 degrees or so. That'll give a ground frost. Here and there some pockets of air frost as well. The last of those showers getting out of the way first thing. Then for central and eastern areas of England, a dry day, a reasonable amount of sunshine, cloud tending to develop as the day wears on. Around these western coasts, and more particularly in northwestern parts, still some showers. Some of those showers could turn out to be heavy with hail and thunder, and they're going to become increasingly wintry in and across Scotland. A chilly breeze in that northern part as well. Best temperatures there around about 9 degrees, 11 or 12 degrees or so further south. Then, as we saw at the beginning, it's an unsettled look to the weather. After a bright and in places frosty start on Tuesday, wet and windy weather sweeping across most parts of the country. The rain clearing away from northern Scotland, southeastern parts of England firstly on Wednesday, followed by blustery showers. A very good night.
You have kept this church vibrant. Do I look good enough to eat or what?
It's back.
If you're going to snog me, you better be good.
Brothers and Sisters starts the 28th of October on BBC Two.
Check this out.
So, in their wisdom, the BBC have decided not to give me a new series. They give me a whole new channel, BBC Quirk. TV out of left field. Or when we've got full live coverage of Glastonbury, TV out of a muddy field with limited toilet facilities. A TV channel that picks up the baton from BBC One and Two and runs amok with it.
There will be themes
You might get a whole night of stuff on your favourite programme, or a Vets in Practice Extra where we do things in a bit more detail. And on Saturday nights there'll be a chance to catch up on the week's most talked about BBC programmes. Apparently it's all fine, but they don't like the name Quirk. They want to call this new channel BBC Choice. Same sort of in-depth, in-touch, please adjust your expectations sort of thing, just not such a good name. BBC Choice. I still think Quirk's better.
BBC Digital. The adventure starts here. Call us for more information.
A very good evening to you and welcome to BBC Learning Zone, which includes Newsfile and Spain Inside Out. First, here's Quentin.
Plasticine and building blocks, scooters and sandpits, inflatable squid and Batmobiles. Play is fun, but what can scientists glean about child development from the way children play?
The team also noticed that the patterns of play appeared to change according to whether the child was playing alone or with others. Could it be that the opportunity for children to play with others increases the complexity of play?
Fun to watch, but making scientific sense of it is anything but child's play.
The collection of data is rarely straightforward. Some instances of play are clearly repetitive and therefore ordinary. Others are more inventive and therefore complex.
The Psychology of the Sandpit is at 6:35. And for all the information you could want on BBC Learning Zone programmes, come to our website, www.bbc.co.uk/education.
So now on BBC Learning Zone Newsfile, and this morning's topics are politics and economics.
Labour Prime Minister in number 10 after 18 years of Conservative rule. Tony Blair makes a triumphal progress up Downing Street after leading his party to a landslide.
Today, we are charged with the deep responsibility of government. Today, enough of talking. It is time now to do.
John Major triggers an immediate leadership battle after 7 of his cabinet are swept away.
When the curtain falls, it's time to get off the stage, and that is what I propose to do.
Paddy Ashdown toasts a breakthrough which nearly doubles his strength in the Commons. And in Northern Ireland, Gerry Adams celebrates a victorious day for Sinn Féin. Good evening. The scale of Labour's victory was greater than even its most optimistic predictions and amounts to the most devastating rout of a government in living memory. In fact, for the Conservatives, it was the worst result in more than 150 years. They lost 7 cabinet ministers, including Malcolm Rifkind and Michael Portillo, and the Tories are left with no MPs at all in Scotland or Wales. Labour have won 44% of the vote, the Conservatives 31% and the Liberal Democrats 17%. The swing to Labour is 10.5% on a reduced turnout of 71%.
Tony Blair's first public appearance as Prime Minister with his wife Cherie was turned into a grand finale of Labour's brilliant campaign. Hundreds of party workers and their children, issued with Union Jacks, gave them an ecstatic welcome in Downing Street. To them it was an emotional climax at the end of the hardest journey in politics, from opposition to government. This time family did come first, with the Blairs' 3 young children on the threshold of what's bound to become a life in the public gaze. This might have been the greatest moment in Tony Blair's life, but he didn't show it.
I've just accepted the Majesty of the Queen's kind offer to form a new administration of government in this country. As I stand here before number 10 Downing Street, I know the huge responsibility that is upon me and the great trust that the British people have placed in me. For 18 long years, my party has been in opposition. It could only say it could not do. Today, we are charged with the deep responsibility of government. Today, enough of talking. It is time now to do. Thank you.
Last night's race to be the first seat to declare was won by Sunderland South. The count completed less than an hour after the polls closed.
Christopher John Mullin, the Labour Party candidate, 27,174.
It was the first tremor signalling what was to become an earthquake. Just after midnight, the first Labour gain, Birmingham Edgbaston, a marginal for the seat that the Tories have held since 1922.
I'd like to thank the people of Edgbaston for entrusting me with being their first ever Labour Member of Parliament.
Basildon, which gained a special place in Tory hearts when their victory there 5 years ago symbolised John Major's surprise comeback, went to Labour with a whopping 18% swing. And then the big names began to go. Michael Forsyth, the Scottish Secretary, was the first Minister of Cabinet rank to lose his place in the Commons. The Foreign Secretary, Malcolm Rifkin, went down in Edinburgh Pentlands. And the Scottish Nationalists claimed another senior scalp, the President of the Board of Trade, Ian Lang. In the next Parliament, there will be no Conservative MPs returned by Scotland or indeed Wales. But as the likely contenders for John Major's mantle digested what was happening, and those accustomed to office contemplated life in opposition, perhaps the biggest upset of the night.
Twig, Stephen, Labour Party, 20,507.
This time yesterday, Michael Portillo was being spoken of as one of those most likely to lead his party in the next Parliament, but he won't even have a place on the backbenches. 3:15 and Labour passed the winning post. Not an opinion poll, not even an exit poll, these were real seats in Parliament. With one of the safest seats in the country, John Major was among the few Conservatives who could arrive at the count last night, sure of staying in the Commons.
I telephoned Mr. Blair a little over an hour ago to congratulate him on his success and to wish him every good fortune in the great responsibilities that he will have in the years that lie ahead.
The Liberal Democrats' share of the vote was pretty much what it was 5 years ago, but they targeted their efforts skillfully and they benefited from tactical voting. Paddy Ashdown has delivered more seats than any leader of his party since Lloyd George.
And we will use that force, we will use the vote that people have given us in the next Parliament with a hugely increased number of Liberal Democrat members of Parliament to fight every minute, every second, every hour through the next Parliament for those things that we have campaigned for in this election.
The Scottish Nationalists benefited from the Tory collapse too. Alex Salmond's SNP added 3 seats to its tally. In Wales, Plaid Cymru's position held steady. Some contests will enter political mythology. Martin Bell transformed from war correspondent to anti-sleaze campaigner and MP in a matter of weeks. David Mellor perhaps making the opposite journey from politician to broadcaster. As they flew down to London and power, Tony Blair's famously disciplined campaign team showed signs of relaxing. The last time the light of a post-election dawn shone on a victorious Labour leader was nearly 23 years ago. Most of those who voted for the first time yesterday weren't even born then. Edward Sturton, BBC News.
The first marginal constituency to fall to Labour was Birmingham Edgbaston, won by Gisela Stewart. It was the early indicator of the mood of the nation. The seat had been held by the Conservatives since 1922.
How are you going to sort of spend,
Edgbaston's first Labour MP for 75 years is adapting quickly to her new role. She said her landmark result in the early hours of this morning was simple proof that Labour had won the trust of those who felt betrayed by the Tories.
In Edgbaston, I found that at many stages it wasn't a question of me winning them over. They would come to me and say, do you realise what's happening to the NHS? Do you realise what is going on in schools? Because these are professionals who actually know what goes on behind the scenes, and they were echoing what we were saying.
Labour's triumph here in Edgbaston symbolises the success of the campaign to both reassure and inspire the floating voters of Middle England. Just as 5 years ago, Basildon came to symbolise how the Tories had won over Essex man and woman. Of course, they lost Basildon as well last night.
Edgbaston is a prosperous suburb, but many voters here felt the Conservatives had let down too many people over the past 18 years.
The health service had a lot to do with the way the vote went in Birmingham. I mean, they're closing hospitals left, right and centre, hospital beds particularly.
We've been here 45 years in this area, and they haven't been doing enough. The crime is going up, the litter, everything is going wrong. So we thought, well,
have a change.
In Northern Ireland, Sinn Féin has won 2 seats, the party's best ever result. The Sinn Féin president, Gerry Adams, won back West Belfast, the seat he lost to the SDLP 5 years ago. The party's chief negotiator, Martin McGuinness, won in Mid-Ulster. Neither will take up their places at Westminster.
The Republican slogan is, "Our day will come." Gerry Adams said today it was here. A tide of Sinn Féin supporters swept their new MP through Belfast city centre, on exactly the same streets where John Major walked on Monday. Sinn Féin and the IRA always blamed him for the breakdown of the peace process. They believe the votes Gerry Adams gathered vindicate what they called their peace strategy. Everyone else said a vote for Sinn Féin was a vote for violence. 25,000 people in West Belfast backed Gerry Adams.
This election and the outcome today makes it a compulsion for all of those in the establishment in London and Dublin to urgently restore a proper peace process on the basis of equality.
He said he would hold out the hand of friendship to the Unionists in his constituency. The leader of the Unionist Party, which took the most seats in Northern Ireland, was none too impressed.
When there is real peace, and of course it's within the power of Mr. Adams and his associates to end violence, and nobody is stopping them from ending violence, they can do it immediately. If any hand of peace and friendship is being offered, let it first be done genuinely by a genuine, complete and permanent ending of violence.
Sinn Féin picked up a second seat for the first time, Martin McGuinness in Mid-Ulster. After the declaration, the outgoing MP, William McRae of the Democratic Unionists, refused to stand on the same platform with them. The 2 leading public faces of militant republicanism are MPs, the only ones who won't take their seats in the British Parliament. Dennis Murray, BBC News, Belfast.
The final election result has transformed the country's political map and broken a number of records. From the election studio, Peter Snow has this summary of how the nation voted.
Well, here's how Tony Blair's new Labour Party has transformed the electoral map of the country. This is the way it looked before, an awful lot of blue down there in the southeast of England and across the Midlands, and this is how it now looks. With Labour, the largest number of Labour MPs in history, and Perry Ashton's Liberal Democrats crossing the whole of the south coast here, Isle of Wight, Portsmouth South and Eastbourne, taking seats there, some of them that the Liberal Democrats haven't had for a very long time, doubling their representation in Parliament. No sign of the Tories in Wales or Scotland, none at all. Here we have the Labour target seats, the ones that Mr. Blair was aiming at in order to get a comfortable majority in Parliament. Now, these were, most of them, as you can see, Tory last time. The higher the block of blue, the safer they were for the Tories. Cut 3 Liberal Democrat seats the Labour Party were aiming at, and 1 Plaid Cymru seat there in West Wales. And here's how effective Mr. Blair's fire was on those Tory targets. Watch the hit box down here. All he needed was 57, and he would have had an overall majority. Starting with Falmouth and Camborne in Cornwall. There they go. Labour majorities replacing the Conservative strength in these marginal seats. Many of them now with really hefty Labour majorities. There's Vale of Glamorgan in South Wales. Tiny Tory majority transferred into a large Labour red bloc there. Up into Scotland, where Michael Forsyth's seat, for example, last one there, it's going up, and now it's a Labour majority in the Scottish Secretary seat. He's one of 7 cabinet ministers to go down. So there we are. That's the picture of the country now. 98 hits on the target area, 2 misses, with Labour triumphant in their attack on the Conservatives all over the country. When we look inside the House of Commons, on the opposition benches, John Major, with fewer Conservative MPs than this party has had since 1906. Next door to him, Paddy Ashdown, with a number of Liberal Democrats, which beats anything they've seen since 1931. 29 others. And here's the winning post any party needs to cross to form an overall majority, and Tony Blair's Labour Party racing towards it to create record after record, one of them being that they've never had as many MPs as this in the Commons before, 419 of them, and the majority then, the overall majority that Labour will have when you subtract the opposition from the government, a majority of 179, the biggest Labour majority, the biggest of any party, any party majority since before 1945.
Well, if it was a cataclysmic night for the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom, what adjectives are left to describe their devastation in Wales and Scotland? Who could have predicted not a single Tory seat in either country? Scotland's oldest political party wiped out, its hierarchy in chaos. Politics in Scotland will now have to operate in a quite different way. Could it be that the Scottish Conservatives will now see their salvation in a Scottish Parliament? Here's Gordon Brewer.
Kirsty, well, as you say, adjectives are a bit difficult, but if we call last night a disaster for English Conservatives, their colleagues in Scotland and Wales were still green with envy. They have no MPs left at all, and while that's obviously a catastrophe for them, it's arguably not very healthy for British democracy either. Somehow, Scottish and Welsh Tories have to muster their resources and begin the long journey back from oblivion. The Last Lament was playing for some famous Scottish Tories, Malcolm Rifkind in Edinburgh Pentlands, Michael Forsyth in Stirling, Ian Lang in Galloway and Upper Nithsdale, and Eastwood, the Tories' safest Scottish seat, fell to Labour. This is an historic change. Only 40 years ago, the Tories had the largest number of Scottish seats. After annihilation, recrimination, Michael Forsyth refused to give up on the policies which led his party to defeat.
I believe passionately that a tax-raising parliament will damage Scotland's public funding, will damage the Union and lead to the breakup of the United Kingdom.
But Mr Forsyth's word isn't law anymore. Already other Tories are saying that to keep opposing devolution would be ridiculous.
I think we have to accept now that it's a new ballgame. All the policies have got to be re-examined. It has been proved in opinion poll after opinion poll, I think, that the majority of people in Scotland wish some kind of parliament or assembly. I think we have got to recognise that, and we've got to produce a better version of devolution than the Labour Party is offering.
But the greatest irony in their current predicament is that salvation for the Scottish Tories may well lie in 2 things they've been fighting against, tooth and nail, for the past few years: a Scottish Parliament and proportional representation. Standing as Scottish Conservatives in elections for the Parliament will help them shake off the image of being, as one leading party member put it today, a branch office of Smith Square. And PR will help them win seats. Even if they only get around a 5th of the vote, they'll get a 5th of the MPs, not none, like last night. The Welsh Tories may adopt a more relaxed attitude, feeling they simply succumb to the Britain-wide swing. But in Scotland, some Tories are already talking of distancing themselves from London, becoming a sort of Scottish version of the Ulster Unionists. In this Scottish Tory apocalypse, almost anything is thinkable.
Well, before the election was called, the parties were in hot pursuit of the black and Asian vote. The results in a number of marginals could hinge on which party most appeals to them. But many African Caribbean Britons remain reluctant to vote at all, partly because of a widespread view that politicians live on a different planet. Now, though, meetings have been set up in an attempt to prove them wrong.
A night out for members of the black community, which could decide which way they'll vote. 1 in 4 of the ethnic minority population is of African or Caribbean descent. Many say the campaign so far has been conducted as if the black voter doesn't exist. People here had hard questions to ask the platform.
I want to ask about fairness generally in the country. It has been quite a long time. People from the African origin have been subjected to unfairness in all sort of parameters, all sort of ways, at work, along the street, on the road, at home, everywhere.
My youngest qualified last year, graduated, and up to now he hasn't got a job yet.
My main interest is on immigration and the treatment of refugees.
Part of the challenge for politicians is to boost the black turnout, which tends to be low. Polls have suggested that amongst the under-25s, only 16% are certain to vote.
We have serious problem in terms of getting our people to participate in the political process in this country, because they strongly believe the political parties or the politicians don't in any way address the kind of issues that are of concern to them.
It has, for the Liberal Democrats, been their most successful night since the war. Just look at the target seats they were aiming at and how effective their fire on those targets has been. Something like 50 target seats all over the country, half of them, just over half of them, are clustered across here in the south from St Ives, right the way across to Folkestone and Hythe, Michael Howard, the Home Secretary seat over here, and Colchester up there. So a great swathe of blue down here. The higher the block of blue, the more difficult for Liberal Democrats to catch that seat. 1 or 2 Labour seats targeted by the Liberal Democrats up in the north, but otherwise it is Conservative territory. Now, as we fly over those targets, watch how effective Paddy Ashdown's fire has been. Little box mark hits there, watch how many he hits and how many he misses. Starting with Folkestone and Hythe, the Home Secretary seat, not quite, that stays with the Tories. Isle of Wight goes down, along the south coast now, those seats down, Taunton has gone, and there we go up into the Midlands. Huge, great Liberal Democrat piles. The Labour Party, of course, taking some of the Liberal Democrats' targets, as you expect, but there you are, that very mixed picture in the north, but in the south, the great success the Liberal Democrats have had here, missing only a very few Conservative seats like Folkestone and Hythe here, Eastbourne and Hastings and Rye, otherwise taking a very successful number of targets, 20 of the 27, which when you add to the other seats they've gained, like Harrogate and so on, and of course their existing parliamentary representation, they're doubling their representation in Parliament. Now, let's just have a look at the Liberal Democrat story over the years. You have to go back to Asquith in 1923 to see them with 3-figure representation in Parliament. Lloyd George had 59 Liberal Democrat MPs in 1929. In 1931 it was down to 36. And then there was that long period in the wilderness where the Liberal Dems were down to sort of single figures, sometimes as low as 6. 23 Liberal Democrats